Meanwhile, News Central's television is undertaking a review of the current administration's pledge to ensure that it upholds the rule of law in the country. Our correspondent Joshua Imarayi takes us through the last 12 months of the government and tells us more.
On May 29, 2023, Nigeria's newly inaugurated President Bola Tinubu made a pledge to citizens, marking a significant moment in the country's history.
Nigeria will be impartially governed according to the rule of law.
Yet, a string of crucial developments has raised questions about the viability of President Tinubu's pledge, shrouding his administration prospect in uncertainty and fueling concerns about its ability to follow the rule of law. On the 25th of July 2023, the Department of State Services rearrested Nigeria's former governor of the nation's apex central bank, Godwin Emefiele, defying a court order for his release. The situation at the court premises quickly degenerated into a fracas between prison officials and officers from Nigeria's secret police, the DSS. These incidents served as the first major test of the rule of law under the administration of President Bola Tinubu.
They prevent the court order from being fulfilled. That is another kettle of fish that we will have to interrogate in due course. That is now contempt of the court order.
Despite that, nothing was done to those involved. Emefiele spent a total of 151 days in the custody of security agencies from June 10 to November 8 before being remanded on November 18 at the Kuje Correctional Center. He was released after spending 34 days in detention. Another case to note was the arrest of the former chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Abdulrasheed Bawa. Following a prolonged period of detention, the DSS released the former chairman after he spent 134 days in their custody. Bawa's release marked the end of a tumultuous tenure marked by controversies and allegations of financial misconduct.
Initially, when Fagbemi SAN was appointed, we saw the body language of the government. The government was not going to condone human rights violations in the country. And we saw this by him directing SSS to comply, that all security agencies must comply with rule of law and all that. We also felt that Bola Ahmed Tinubu, as somebody who had done a lot in the Nadeco days, and his exile during the Abacha era, that he was coming on board as someone who will not tolerate any form of human rights violations. But almost everywhere you turn in the country, you see one form of violation or the other.
Cases of press freedom were not excluded, with journalists facing arrest and detention under the 2015 Cybercrime Act. Two notable cases include the arrest of Segun Olatunji, editor of the First News, who was taken from his Lagos home on March 15 by military personnel and held incommunicado in Abuja for several days before his release. During his detention, Journalist Union and his media organization advocated tirelessly for his freedom.
I think I blame the security agencies. It's like they are overzealous. They are overzealous in carrying out their duties. Because sometimes most of these things happen behind the eyes or even the ears of the political leaders.
Another instance was the arrest of Daniel Ojukwu, a journalist with the Foundation for Investigative Journalism. Ojukwu was picked by the intelligence response team of the Inspector General of Police and transferred to Abuja. This sparked a protest at the force headquarters. Pro-transparency groups and media practitioners say his arrest highlights the ongoing challenges to press freedom in the country and the president's disposition to using security agencies to subvert the rights of perceived critics of the government.
It's not about Daniel Ojukwu. They are after your jobs. They want to make sure that you cannot write what the police does not approve of. And your job as journalists is to expose, is to shine light on the government. Your jobs are guaranteed in the Nigerian constitution, their so-called 1999 constitution. Just as the police has a constitutional right to do what they are doing, journalists in Nigeria also have a constitutional right to write whatever they find necessary.
President Tinubu's inauguration came with promises to uphold the law. This definitely has been tested by a series of events, from the rearrest of Godwin Emefiele to the detention of journalists like Segun Olatunji and Daniel Ojukwu. It is clear that the administration's commitment to its pledges has been called into question.
One of the greatest reforms we can have in Nigeria today is if it is possible for us to have reforms towards separating the office of the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice. Do you understand? Like we have in other climes. What that will do for us is that it will separate politics from administration of criminal justice or justice generally in the country.
As Nigeria continues on its path forward, it remains to be seen whether the government will prioritize the principle of justice, accountability, and press freedom that are fundamental to a healthy democracy. In Abuja for News Central, I am Joshua Imarayi.
Now joining me on the news to discuss this is lawyer Douglas Ogbankwa. Douglas, good to have you and thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Let's get started, shall we? What legal frameworks has Tinubu advocated for or against in the past year? And how do these align with, the principles of the rule of law?
You know that the president of Nigeria is actually like the alter ego of the country, and most times he achieves his justice reform projects, so to speak, through the Attorney General of the Federation. And you realize that the Attorney General of the Federation is someone who is a seasoned legal practitioner, who has, while he was not going through clearance before the Senate, he raised some issues about the untoward activities of some institutions of states. And he did say that among his agenda is to ensure that institutions of the state adhere to the rule of law. I however want to say that under the control of the President of Nigeria, that there seems to be a misgrill in whether or not institutions of the states have adhered, to the rule of law. While in some instances, there have been some institutions going overboard, like the very shameful situations you found at the Federal High Court, where the DSS and the Nigerian Correctional Service were fighting over who would have custody of the former central bank governor, Godwin Emefiele. That was a sore point in, the administration, because it actually indicated that there seemed not to be a symmetry or some kind of a cooperation between the different institutions in the Nigerian security architecture. Having said that, another aspect of the Nigerian the rule of law spectrum that we need to talk about is how institutions of states obeyed court orders. We would say that there have been some instances where there was obedience of court order, and there were some instances where there was disobedience of court order. And I would want to, however, say that when it comes to whether or not there's been a change in the way that the state actors in Nigerian security architecture have behaved in terms of adherence to the rule of law, I'll tell you plainly that it has been business as usual. There have been no change, and there have not been any kind of deterrence in terms of saying, okay, if you disobey the court order, the Attorney General of the Federation will come and say, this chairman of this institution, or this director general, or this inspector general, or this chief of whether army, naval, or air staff this is what we are going to do to punish you for not adhering to the rule of law. So I would say when it comes to adherence to the rule of law, it has been business as usual. As a matter of fact, I was even a victim
Douglas,
of some kind of attack myself.
Douglas, you just gave instances, right? And you also just said, talked about the administration for the last 1 year, and instances where the rule of law seem to not be in favourance of, these instances. But can Tinubu's actions or statements be interpreted as setting precedents for the application or interpretation of the rule of law in Nigeria? And if so, what implications does it have for the legal landscape so far in Nigeria?
And that's a very brilliant question, I would say. Now, unlike the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, which was quite defiant of the rule of law, like former President Muhammadu Buhari coming to the NBA National Conference and saying just before the body of lawyers that the rule of law is subject to national interest, which is not the law. The rule of law is something that is on its own scale. It's sui generis. The reason we insist that there should be rule of law is so that the strong and the weak should be protected. It is in the interest of those in power to enforce the rule of law so that when they are out of power, the rule of law would protect them. When you protect the rule of law while you are in office, the rule of law will protect you out of office. Talking about the president himself, I would say the president has had a very will I say, strong advocate of the rule of law in terms of his words. Now, whether or not Mr. President has translated that in terms of the action, his action rather, it's a different ballgame, as that could only be demonstrated by the institutions of states adhering to the rule of law.
Douglas.
A situation where, for example, an institution will seize a truck on the way, like in a Gestapo style, take it to their facility, and the next 2 days you come, they will say that they have bumped the truck. That is not the kind of society we want to live.
Douglas, Douglas, we're pressed for time.
Such a story.
Douglas,
you seize a truck on the highway.
Douglas,
you take it to your facility.
Douglas, we have to go now because we're pressed for time. But many thanks for your insights on just the rule of law in the last 1 year. We appreciate you for doing this with us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.